Hi, we got your energy stories for the fourth week of January 2022, and we got a lot of them. First one, a Japanese-Australian venture making hydrogen from coal was set to ship its first cargo on the world's first liquid hydrogen carrier from Melbourne to Kobe last week. The venture, called Hydrogen Energy Supply Chain, is a $360 million US project backed by the Japanese and Australian governments as a strategy to cut carbon emissions. Well, proving up the ability to ship liquid hydrogen is not a bad idea, but making that hydrogen from coal, maybe not so much. In Iowa, MidAmerican Energy is seeking approval to put $3.9 billion to work building out 2,042 megawatts of wind and 50 megawatts of solar. It's also looking to evaluate other tech such as energy storage, small modular nukes, and carbon capture to reduce GHG emissions from its last coal-fired plants. On the data center front, Equinix is pushing the envelope on sustainable data centers in its new co-innovation facility in Virginia that uses liquid-cooled servers supplied by fuel cells, sodium-ion batteries, and overseen by an intelligent power management system. It's part of Equinix's Data Center for the Future program that allows partners to test drive new equipment and software in its facilities. On the storage front, California Community Power just approved an agreement with LS Power Corporation for 8 hours of energy storage using lithium-ion batteries. California has been pushing for longer duration storage with a requirement for 1,000 megawatts of 8+ hour projects by 2026, not something lithium-ion batteries have typically done, with 1 to 4 hours being the sweet spot. This project is a 15-year, 69 megawatt, 552 megawatt hour undertaking in Kern County, so pretty big, starting in 2024. And LS Power beat out other tech, including flow batteries and compressed air. Sticking with storage, Connecticut's Public Utilities Regulatory Authority launched a statewide storage program specifying 580 megawatts over the next 10 years, well, through 2030, for the state's 2 utilities. The capacity will be split between the residential and then the commercial and industrial sector, 50-50 between those two. And it offers both upfront and performance incentives based on battery size and the average amount of energy offered to the grid when required. Average upfront incentives for the resi sector will be around $200 per kilowatt hour, and the commercial industrial customer incentives will be maxed out at 50% of project costs. More on batteries. Fluence Energy signed an agreement with solid-state battery company QuantumScape to develop ways to use their solid-state lithium-ion batteries in stationary storage. That's the first time we've seen solid-state in stationary storage, because usually the densities are what you're looking for in the Eevee space. The two companies will work to validate and test the batteries, which are still in pre-pilot production, and eventually the companies expect to enter into a large-scale supply agreement. Also on the battery front, specifically in the EV space, Chinese battery behemoth Catl, CATL, is launching an EV battery swap business. Now, NIO's had one in the past, Chinese NIO. Here the idea is to deal with range anxiety by making the charging faster and more easily available. Typically, Catl says only 10 to 20% of the total capacity of the batteries needed for daily use. So if you can charge more frequently, you can reduce the size of the batteries needed and drive down the cost of vehicles. The Catl concept uses an innovative modular swap solution with standardized battery blocks and a claimed, quote, high compatibility with vehicle models, able to serve an estimated 80% of the global EV platform-based models that exist up till now, and all platform-based models to be released in the next 3 years, including Tesla. Each 26.5 kilowatt hour block gives you about 125 miles or so. So you might need 1 for commuting or 3 for a lengthier trip. Customers could then swap up to 1 or 3 at a time, or maybe even lease 1 and rent 2 for a longer trip, Catl says. I'll be curious how the company handles interoperability and warranties, but it's certainly a fascinating concept for one of the global leaders in the battery space. And then finally, Scotland has selected 17 offshore wind projects totaling nearly 25,000 megawatts of capacity. We've seen some pretty big auctions and selections in the past, but this one, the really interesting thing is 10 projects and more than half of the awarded capacity are using floating wind technology. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week.